Siman Chafei. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haMashiach v'Dorei.
Amen.
We're on page Kuf Lamed Tes, opposite of page 276. The last word in the line is V'hinei, and that's where we're starting. V'hinei. There you go. V'hinei.
How many
Last
lines?
word.
How many lines?
It's around, I don't know, 12 lines in the bottom.
Oh,
11.
he I guess right.
No doubt.
Yeah. So where are we? What are we talking about? We're talking about, so let's back up a little.
Backtrack.
Let's backtrack, yeah. We started off, this letter is a letter where the Alter Rebbe is coming to the defense of a passage in the Sefer Tzavos Harivash, where the Baal Shem Tov is quoted as saying that if a person is davening and there's a goy disturbing the person davening, so then your person should take this as a sign that I have to be mischazik in my davening, to daven with so much more intention and concentration to the point that I won't even hear the goy. And why is that? What am I supposed to think? How am I supposed to be mechazik myself? How do I strengthen myself? I have to think about the fact that Hashem is everywhere. And even in this goy over here, the Shekhinah right now is speaking through this goy. It is a Shekhinah that's in this goy. And think about how sad it is that Hashem has to enter into this Talmudic vehicle of this goy who's trying to disturb my davening, and that itself, knowing Hashem is willing to enter this incredible golus of entering the goy in order to get me to be mechazik my davening, that itself is a big chizuk for my davening. So the Misnagdim, they totally offended. The Shekhinahs and the goy talking, is the Shekhinah talking, kind of business is this? So the Alter Rebbe says, we started off talking about, we went off a little on the side, anger, right? Anger is the Kaveh Dazara, because everything's from Hashem. Why is everything from Hashem? Because at every single moment, everything is being recreated from nothingness by Hashem. That's where we are right now. Everything that happens, at the end of the day, it has to be from Hashem because this concept that everything is being created by the Asar Mamaras, by Hashem's words. That's what we're holding. And as you see, we're heading in the direction of figuring out how even the goy, the dibur of the goy, the speaking of the goy, is also, it has to be from the Shekhinah. But we're not there yet. But we're getting there.
He's a creation of Hashem anyway.
Not only is it a creation of Hashem, but also everything that a person does has to be from Hashem, because otherwise Hashem is giving that person existence and life and the power to speak at that moment. Let's continue. It is known to those who are familiar with Kabbalah, they know. Kidvar Hashem nikra b'shem Shechina b'lashon Razal. And in the words of Chazal, when they talk about the Shekhinah is a reference to the Dibur of Hashem. We're talking about the Hashem's speech, which expresses itself in the Asar Mamaris, the 10 utterances, the 10 statements with which the world is created. In the words of Chazal, this is called the Shekhinah. And the Eimot Ato Maturnisa B'Lashon HaZoyar. In the Gemara, you find the word Shekhinah. The Zohar, when it's referring to the same thing, it uses different terminology. The Zohar calls it either Eimot Tata, Eimot Tata means the lower mother, or Maternisa. Maternisa means, I'm not sure what the exact translation for it is in English, female member of the nobility, a Maternisa, or a matron, or a queen.
Queen English was matronita.
V'lashon HaZohar, right? Befrat Bereishis Parshas Va'era, especially you find this discussion about this in the Zohar in the beginning of Parshas Va'era. Why is it called Shechina? Lefi Sheshechinu Mislabish B'Nevroim Lach Yesam. This is the part of Hashem as how He manifests Himself, and it resides within creation to give it life. We're saying, what is the Asar Mamaris? The Asar Mamaris enters the worlds, and it gives it existence and it gives it life. That's why it's called Shechina, because Shechina means Shechina is something that dwells, resides. They're the parts of Hashem which are not called Shechina because they are above and beyond. They transcend creation and the world. And then Shechina is that part of Hashem, the Dvar Hashem, the words of Hashem that come down into this world to create. And the words of the Mekubalim, you notice over here that we spoke about in Chazal, it's called Shechina. In the Zohar, it's called
Matronita.
Ema Tata and Matronisa, right? The lower mother, because the higher mother is Bina. That's Ema Yulav. Ema Tata, the lower mother, and Matronisa, the queen. And in the words of the Mekubalim, the latter day Mekubalim, it's called B'Shem Malchus. Why? Al Shem Devar Melech Shilton. There's a pasuk that says, the word of the king is sovereign. The word of the king rules. Ki HaMelech Manig Malchusei B'Dibure. What's the connection between Dibur and Malchus? The king, how does the king run his nation? Using his speech, giving instructions and giving orders. Also other reasons, what the association between Malchus and Dibur, those who are from the no Kabbalah know there's also other reasons why these two are correlated with each other. On a very simple level, both Dibur and Malchus, they share a certain function, which is neither one of them are necessary for the shleimus of a person. A person doesn't need to be able to speak. For him or herself, if a person lives on a desert island, they don't need to speak.
Case in point, the Friedrich Rabbi. When he had a stroke.
Right, so his speech was impacted.
His communication was
Right.
amazing.
Right. But the point is that for my own personal spiritual growth and for my completion, my shleimus, I don't need to speak. I need to have chachma, I need to have bina, I need to have das. These are all necessary components. I need to have chesed, gvura, all these things are important. But speaking is not for myself. Well, what's the purpose of speaking? Speaking is in order to be able to relay the information that I have to someone else. So speaking is for the purpose of someone else. It's not for me, it's for someone else. Malchus is the same thing. Royalty is the same thing. So today, you have people who are in positions of royalty. When I say royalty, I don't mean necessarily the royalty as, the Queen of England or the King of Saudi Arabia, but I mean in positions of power.
Yeah.
And that's their whole mahus, and that's their whole mitzias. If they weren't in positions of power, they'd be nothing, right? So that's who they are. So they're not defined by what they are. They're defined by the fact that they're... that's not a king, that's a dictator. That's a tyrant. I'm not talking about that. A king, the way the real understanding of a king, the ideal king, the way it is understood in Yiddishkeit, is a person who is essentially above and beyond everyone else. Higher, greater than everyone else. Like Shalom Malach, right? Shalom Malach, what do we say about him? That he was head and shoulders above everyone else. Physically, he actually was physically taller than everyone else, and that represented the idea that spiritually he was higher than everyone else. Now, you realize someone who's spiritually higher than everyone else, the last thing in the world they want to do is become a king. Deal with all the people and all the, and that's why historically we find, Shaul didn't want to be king, become the king. And Moshe Rabbeinu refused leadership. What does Moshe need? Moshe, he spent 7 days arguing with Hashem, saying, "What do I need this for? I'm doing just fine over here.
Give it to my
I'm
brother.
a shepherd of sheep. Give it to my brother. I'm connected. I learned Torah, and what do I need? Yeah, what do I need? What do I need this for?"
But
Right. Yeshayahu, Yirmiyahu, all these people, right? And also later the generations, an example of our generation is the Rebbe. It took the Rebbe a full year for them to convince at first the Rebbe was, in a very blanket way, refusing anything had to do with it. After the Rebbe, before the passing of the Friedrich Rebbe, the Rebbe, he wore a short jacket. He didn't wear a kapata. He wore a short jacket. The Friedrich Rebbe passed away. And then for the Shloshim, the Rebbe wore a kapata. And then after the Shloshim, the Rebbe took it off and put on his jacket. He's like, "Leave me alone." And people would request and say, "No." Someone who's truly a great person, felt in Mois, he's missing out being a king and having to deal with all the lowly people and their needs and their desires of running a nation. And that's why there's this whole concept of Hachtaras HaMelech, the coronation of a king. And the purpose of coronation is that the people come together and they beg and they cajole and they plead, please. And we do, by the way, we do the same thing with Hashem on Rosh Hashanah. We beg Hashem, Maleich ala ilam kuli b'kvedecha. Hashem is like what? In the Zohar it talks about the Asara Mamaris, the ten utterances with which the world was created. The Zohar says that these are Milei de Hedyoita. Milei de Hedyoita means these are mundane words.
Question.
And then the Zohar says, "V'lav urcha de malka lishtoi b'mili de dieta." It's not the way of the king to deal with it, to deal with such with mundane matters. The Eibishter needs to create worlds. He needed it for himself. The idea of malchus, royalty, kingship, which is an attribute, which by the way is taka ingrained within people, it just has to be brought out. There is a desire, just like the desire to communicate to others, the desire also to influence others. That's the malchus within every person, and the greater a person, the greater the capacity for malchus within the person. But ultimately, you have to realize that malchus is not for the benefit of the king. The malchus is for the benefit of the nation. The king himself would prefer to sit himself and to pursue whatever lofty pursuits that he's used to. So that is the parallel between malchus and dibur. Both of them are, in the language of Chassidus, b'shvil hazulas. They're not for the b'shvil hazulas. They're for the other. They're for the next. They're for the other person. They're not for themselves. You speak not for yourself, but to communicate with others. And malchus also is for others. And how taka does the king communicate to his nation? Is through speech. Okay. So we've established up until this point. What do we establish? Hashem is constantly recreating the world. And recreating the world through the Asar Mamaras, through the 10 utterances. 10 utterances are Hashem's Dibur. And Hashem's Dibur correlate with the Shechina and Malchus. That's the same, they're all the same. Hashem's Dibur and Shechina and Malchus, they're all different words to describe the same entity.
Hashem could do it without Dibros, but Chuf is Hashem also, right?
Sorry, what?
A man has to talk to somebody else, but I just can't push off with the...
But they should create a system and how it works. And this is how this is the system that Hashpah comes through Malchus.
Chuf is Hashem also, with Chuf,
Yeah. But the Chafetz itself doesn't translate directly. It's an indirect cause. It's not the direct cause. It's like the Shadish of the Shadish. At the end of the day, everything comes about the Eibishter's Ratzon. But Ratzon, because of Ratzon, the whole Seder Shnashlos comes into place. So after Ratzon, Yevchachma, Bina, Das, Chesed, Gvura, Hashem's Ratzon put it in place, the system which brought about the creation of the worlds. But the actual creation is through Malchus. To put it in different words, when I speak, the reason why I'm speaking to you is because I want to. If there is no Ratzon, I wouldn't do it. So the first cause is my Ratzon, my desire to have a relationship with you. But the actual relationship expresses itself in Dibur. The actual relationship is in the Dibur.
The Dibur is the Etzem.
No, not at all. Dibur is not my Etzem.
When I want to relate to someone, so I go out of myself for this one.
Okay. Yeah, there's actually a very deep concept in Chassidus. I don't know if that's what you're referring to. The ability to be able to relate to someone outside of me has to come from a place within me which is beyond even my mitzias, and which is why I can relate to someone else. And therefore,
exactly
Dibur,
what
in a
I'm
certain way, is a very high shadish, but that's a little too deep for the rest of the pasuk. So we'll leave that to me and you. Okay. So,
Don't ask.
5 lines from the bottom. And that's why, by the way, what you're saying is why human beings are known as medaber. Why would a person be known as a medaber? It seems to be such a secondary or tangential thing. Yeah, there's me, and also I can speak. Am I defined by my capacity to speak? But to a certain extent, the answer is yeah, but let's not go there. Okay? What?
The Behind can't speak, and we can speak.
How gufa tzarechim? Verwassen das besteht der Chilik zwischen
They
Menschen und Behemoth?
communicate between them, so they do speak.
But
Animals
that doesn't
communicate.
answer. Why would it be that the human being is defined by speech? That's a strange thing. And by the way, that's the only thing that makes us different than animals.
Mm-hmm.
There are other things also. We have chins. Animals don't have chins. But we're not called chin people. We're called medabers. Weiter, Mudaza is 5 lines from the bottom. Mudaza is it is known Yes, beginnes or madrigas. That although here we're talking about Malchus, there are different levels of Malchus. There's Malchus Datzilus, There's Malchus as it is in the world of Atzilus, Ubechinas Malchus de Bria v'chulu, and there's Malchus as it is in the world of Bria, etc. Upirush, what does that mean? What does it mean, different levels of Malchus? Malchus d'Atzilus, what is Malchus d'Atzilus? Hu Dvar Hashem. Again, Malchus, as we said, correlates with Hashem's speech, right? Is the words of Hashem, Hamachava u'Machaya. Sorry, Hamachaya u'Mahava, which gives life to and creates Neshamas Hagdolos, the very great Neshamas, Sheheinu v'Chinas Atzilus. The Neshamas that are at the level of Atzilus. To put it in different words, everything that exists in the world of Atzilus is created by Malchus of Atzilus. So what exists in the world of Atzilus?
Even in Atzilus to do dibber?
Sorry?
Even in Atzilus there is dibber?
Yeah, Malchus Atzilus is Hashem's Dibur, yeah. When we talk about Shechina in general, if we don't say anything else, Shechina B'chlal is Malchus of Atzilus, yeah.
Why call it Beneshemot HaGdolot? That's a big tzaddikim or it's everyone?
No, you know, the big Neshamas, Shehem B'chinas Atzilus, level of Atzilus, Kamei, for example, Nishmas Adam Erishan. For example, the Neshama of Adam, Shenemer, by regarding whom it is said, Vayipach Ba'apab Nishmas Chaim. Hashem himself blew the Neshama into Adam. Adam had a tremendously high Neshama. He had the Neshama that included it, the Neshamas of all quality soul for all generations. He had a Neshama of Atzilus. U'kamei Neshamis ha'avis va'anevim u'kayetzu b'hen, like the Neshamis of the Avis, the Nevim. Shahayu Merkava LaHashem. We know that the Avis were Merkava at Hashem, a concept that we've encountered in the past. And Merkava means with 100% complete bittul, which that is what Atzilus is all about. Anything in Atzilus doesn't have a self-identity. It's 100% batal. We call it batal b'mitzias. There's two different, general, Chassidus talks about two different levels of bittul. There's what's called bittul hayash, which is a lower level of bittul, and bittul b'mitzias, which is a higher level of bittul. Bittul hayash means I am batal to my boss, because he's greater than me. And he pays my paycheck, and he's smarter than me. So, or the way I'm bottled to someone who's a big Rosh Yeshiva. What does that mean, bottled? That means I'm nothing. It doesn't mean I'm nothing. It means I'm something, and he's greater than me. And that bittul hayesh is something that all of us can and should and must feel towards Hashem. A higher level of bittul is called bittul b'mitzias. Bittul b'mitzias is not that I am, but he is greater. Bittul b'mitzias means I don't exist. It's all Eibishter. I realize that I am nothing but an expression of Hashem, an outgrowth of Elokus. That is the madriga of the world of Atzilus, because Atzilus is a world of complete bittul to Hashem, utter bittul to Hashem, and the neshamis of Atzilus are completely bittul to Hashem, even as they come down here into this world.
I have a question. You said bittul is Atzilus. In the Hebrew language, bittul is bittul, nothing. Atzilus is very high class. Ta'atzil, you're big, you're mighty. It's the opposite.
Right, but this is a different meaning of the word Atzilus. Atzilus means emanation. As the Pasuk says, Vayatzal min haruach. Atzilus is something which is ne'etzal, something which emanates, emits. Atzilus doesn't feel itself as a creation, it just feels itself as an emanation, something that extends forth from Hashem. It's not related, I don't think, to the word what you're talking about, the aristocracy. So these neshamis
What means Merkava Hashem? What is that referring to?
Merkava is like a chariot.
The chariot.
Yeah.
How do you relate that in the other Mitzilus?
Because a chariot represents a certain level of bittul.
Ah.
When the rider rides the chariot and the rider turns to and the rider goes to the right.
Yeah.
Does the chariot say, the truth is, I'd rather go to the left. But the rider is bigger than me and stronger than me,
He's the
smarter than me, and if he wants to go to the right, you know what? I'm going to follow him and go to the right.
Right, yeah.
No, it's not pshat. The rider has no ratzon of its own. So therefore, a merkava, it does whatever the rider wants it to do without any ratzon. And that's why it symbolizes the idea of bittul b'mitzias, not bittul hayesh. Bittul hayesh is when your boss tells you to do something and you say, okay, I'm being mevatel my yesh, I'm going to put aside my yesh, and I'm going to subordinate. Merkava is not subordination. There's nothing to subordinate. Right. Ubeteilim mamish b'mitzias. The neshamis of Atzilus are mamish batal b'mitzias. A love to Hashem. K'maimer Razal, as our sages tell us, Shechina medaberes metegrene shel Moshe. The Shechina spoke from the mouth of Moshe, which is very interesting. Most people, what does that mean? Shechina medaberes metegrene shel Moshe. most of us, the way we understand it, is that Hashem spoke to Moshe, and Moshe conveyed and relayed that information to Klal Yisrael.
No.
That's not what Shechina Medaberes Tarkein Shel Moshe means. Shechina Medaberes Tarkein Shel Moshe means
Actually spoke out.
that when Moshe opened his mouth, the Shechina spoke through him. Now
You just can't do it.
yeah. And we talk about Miyisoidei Hadas Shakel Menabes B'nei Adam, the Rambam says. Foundation of Yiddishkeit is that the Eibishter Menabes B'nei Adam. What does that mean? Did he use messages to people? That he speaks through people. That he speaks through people. For Hashem to speak through someone, that person has to be Batal B'Metzias. Hashem is not speaking through someone who's a Metzias. A person who's so completely Batal to Hashem to the point there's no self-identity, and what's speaking through him? Hashem is speaking through him. That's the level of Moshe and the Avos. V'chein kol ha-neviim u'bali ruach HaKodesh. It's not only Moshe Rabbeinu, all the Neviim. Obviously, Moshe is in the highest level. Lekam oid navi v'yisol k'Moshe, which means that the level of Shechina that spoke through Moshe was on a higher level than any other Navi. But ultimately, every Navi, its pshat is that Hashem is speaking through the Navi. And the same thing is Bali Ruach HaKodesh. Hoyekoil v'dibur ha'elyon, the divine voice was mislabish bekoilim v'diburam, would enter, be mislabish, in their voice, mamish, Commissioner Kosov Arizal, as the Arizal writes. Okay. So from Malchus Datzilus, what comes from Malchus Datzilus is the neshamis of the world of Atzilus. Because again, the Shechina is what creates. What does it create? In every world, the Shechina of that world, the Malchus of that world, creates everything in that world. So in the world of Atzilus, what's created over there is neshamis. Malchus de Bria, what does Malchus of Bria create? To Devar Hashem. Malchus de Bria, now it creates the Neshamis and the Malachim, which are the world of Bria. They're not in the level of Malchus of Atzilus. Now you notice over here, that when we got to Bria, suddenly we introduced Malachim. In the world of Atzilus, we didn't talk about Malachim. We talked only about Neshamis. In the world of Bria, we talk about Malachim. And why is that? Because there are no Malachim in Atzilus. Why are there no Malachim in Atzilus? Because a malach, as holy as a malach might be.
But as mamish, as he's not bottled.
That's correct.
He's not transparent. He's not.
Yeah, not utterly transparent.
Not utterly
As bittul hayesh, not bittul b'metzias.
Bittul hayesh, not bittul b'metzias.
The malach is a yesh. It's a yesh mishayev. It's a yesh that loves Hashem, and we have the malach Michal and his entire army of hundreds of thousands of malachim, and they're busy serving the Eibishter with Ava. Then you have Malach Gavriel and all of his hundreds of thousands of Malachim, Machane Gavriel, and they're serving the Eibishter. They're quaking and trembling with awe for Hashem.
They have a guf, the malach.
No, Shaila. Shaila. Some say yes, but Ruch needs to go. Some say no, but
They don't have roots nuts.
Sorry?
They have roots nuts means? No.
They can take,
Yeah.
they can take on
Yeah.
the form, but they're not. That's not their essence.
Vuharaya, by the way, that's why, by the way, Malachim were even punished. Matat was punished, right? The Malachim in Sdoim, in other words, Malachim can mess up. How can they mess up? Because they're a yesh. A holy yesh, but they're a yesh. There's a day that they have a form that the Pasuk says, what the... Hey...
They take
Eise malachav rucha is eish loyit. What's the lashon? I'm mixing up the words. But something, there's a day that holds the malachim are made up of fire and wind. Whether it's literally or not literally, okay, that's not so relevant to our conversation. The bottom line is that malachim have a mitzias. By the way, just to realize, the moment you say I love Hashem, that's already not bittul b'mitzias. That's bittul hayesh. The moment you say I fear Hashem, that's not bittul b'mitzias. That's bittul hayesh.
I is the ich.
There's an I.
I.
There's an I. And that's why the Alter Rebbe writes, earlier on in Tanya, in Perik Lamites.
Because I think I understand this concept, because when you're talking about...
You put in the I, that's good.
Yeah.
Like a malach.
iPad,
Yeah.
iPhone, everything is I.
When,
YouTube.
when somebody talks about I, that means I create, I'm responsible. But we need to understand that that I comes from Hashem. Hashem decides what I'm going to do, what I'm thinking, my actions, the whole blueprint for our life.
There is no fault in being an I because most of us are trapped in that. Most of us cannot reach a level of bittul b'metzias. A malach can't reach a level of bittul b'metzias.
Okay.
It's not a fault. It's not a flaw. It's who they are.
Yeah.
And everything that Hashem creates serves its purpose.
Yeah.
The Alter Rebbe in Perek Lametes, Alter Rebbe talks about Atzilus. He says, "Hu modir l'tzadikim ha'gedolim." Atzilus is the place. It's the home for the great tzaddikim. Sha'avedasam yilamayla mayla afilu bebechinas dechilu urechimu. That their avodah is even higher than Ava and Yira. And even though in Ava and Yira there are two different levels of Ava and Yira, we're not going, as we learned, their avodah is even higher than the highest level of Ava and Yira. Their avodah is Mesiras Nefesh, which is bittul b'metzias. And when you're talking about bittul b'metzias, you can't talk anymore Ava. It's not about good. You know that in our experience, most of us, we don't have a neshama that's Atzilus, but at the core, our neshama is Atzilus, our core. But that's not the level of neshama that we're living with on a daily basis. But when does that level of neshama come revealed? When a yid is given a nesoyin al kiddush Hashem. So then the etzem, the pintel yid, which is from Atzilus, comes revealed. At which point a yid gives up his life al kiddush Hashem. And not because he wants to, but because he can't do otherwise. Which is a very interesting point. Because if I want to, that's yes.
Yes, yeah.
But no, it's because I can't do otherwise. Because when that part of the neshama is revealed, it's not me making a choice. It's a lukus.
So where's the free will?
What?
So what about the free will? Every person has free will to make a decision. So you're saying he has no free will?
That's his free will that he.
Okay.
That's not free will.
As I
he
said,
has no choice.
You
just said that.
I said that.
He has no choice because that's who he is. He can't go against.
That's not free will.
Hashem.
I mentioned on the side, we're not going there now.
Oh, no, forget about it. Let's go.
Trying to bring out this nakuda, that there are certain great neshamas, that they're on the level of Atzilus, the Avis, the Nevi'im, that even as they're down here in this world, they're bittul b'metzias. It's just to understand that about the great tzaddikim. We're not talking about someone who's just a greater person than me. So I am a big Talmid Chacham, but he's a bigger Talmid Chacham. And I am a little tzaddik, and he or she is a bigger tzaddik. It's a different stratosphere. It's everything Beira and Nivra. I'm a yesh, and the tzaddik is bittul b'metzias. The tzaddik is in ganze bittul b'metzias, and Shechina medaber mit der Grene. Okay. So, again, in Bria, so what's Bria? In Bria is created, so something which we've talked about in the past, which is that every single neshama, alikai, neshama, shenasata bi, tohoirahi, starts off, tohoira is Atzilus. So why is it called tohoira? Tohoira means it's pure, untainted. What is it untainted by? What is it pure from? From Yeshus, from any identity. Elikai, every one of us says in the morning, neshama shenasata bi, the neshama started off as tohoira. Now, for the people who are big tzaddikim, that's where it stops. Neshama shenasata bi tohoira. But for the rest of us, then we say, Ata berasa. Then you took that neshama and it went into the world of Bria and suddenly became a creation, became a yesh. Ata yitzarta, right? And then it went through into the world of Yitzira. Ata nefachta bi. And then it went into the world of Asiya. Ata meshamra bikirbi, and that was when it goes into the guf. But the point is that the rest of the neshamas come down. So the creation of the neshamas, that's from Malchus of Bria. That's the lower level neshamas. And now the Alter Rebbe skips Malchus of Yitzira, and we're going to go straight to Malchus of Asiya. He says v'chulu. He includes that just in his etc. In other words, just like Malchus of Bria creates all the creations of Bria, v'chulu, etc. So obviously Malchus of Asiya, of Yitzira, creates all the creations in the world of Yitzira. The Malachim and the Neshamas on the level of Yitzira. Malchus d'Asiya, the Malchus of Asiya, who Devar Hashem, is the word of Hashem, Hamachayi u'mahaves Elam Haza, that gives life to and creates Elam Haza, Bichlole, in general, Ad Yesod ha'afar, all the way through, even the lowest parts, the afar, the earth, V'amayim asher matachas la'aretz, and even the water that's beneath the earth. Elo, the difference is, so what? So the Shechina of the Shechina and Malchus of the world of Asiya, that is the Dvar Hashem, that is the words of Hashem, which sustains and gives life to our world. Elo, however, Shebechutz La'aretz, and here's interesting, by the way, this page is filled with corrections. So I mentioned this in the past, that these Tanyas that we had, right when I started giving the shir over here, probably 7 years ago or so. So the first request I had is that they should buy these Tanyas. For two reasons. First of all, it's a new print. It's a geschmack to read. I don't know if you're like me. Once you start getting used to the new print, reading the old print is difficult. But there's another thing, which is that in the back of Tanyas there's a luach hatikun and all the corrections. And in this edition of Tanya, they all of the corrections are included. They included it in line, so you don't have to use the luach hatikun. So in Tanya, there are various mistakes on them. Are typos.
Why is it in parentheses?
Sorry,
Why is it in parentheses?
I'll tell you. Put in parentheses.
Oh, no.
Yeah. But there are a lot of corrections that are not a matter of typos, but they were intentional errors that were inserted in Tanya because of the censors. Back in the day, in Europe, you wanted to print a sefer, it had to go through the censors. The censors, by the way, I don't know if they themselves understood Hebrew or they had people who worked for them who understood Hebrew, and anything that was considered offensive.
They had Meshumadim.
Sorry?
They had Meshumadim that went over.
Yeah. So, for example, one of the big things is that in all the Sfarim, you'll see the Rambams. The Rambam talks about the Akum, right? So in the original Rambam, it said Nachri or Goy. It was changed to Akum. Why? What's Akum? Akum is Rosh Tevis of Oivet Kichav Mazalis, which is those who worship idolaters. So the censors looked it over, and the censors said, "You're speaking not nice about the non-Jews. We're not going to let you print your book." And they're like, "What are you talking about? We're not talking about you. You're good Christians. This is about the people who worship the stars.
The pagans.
This is about Ivdi Galulim. This is about the India, the Ivdi Zara. Yeah. In fact, there are many Sfarim. They're printed in Europe. They're the beginning of the Sefer. Many Sfarim printed in Europe. You have the beginning of the Sefer. You have a disclaimer. You should know that any time where it says in the Sefer Ivdi Kechavim, it's talking about the ancient nations who worship the idols, who don't exist anymore. But it's not about the people. The goyim of today, wink, wink, right? And all the Yidden knew exactly what it meant. It means the goyim, and for the censors, that was right. Good. So in Tanya also, in general, whenever you see the words Evdi Galulim in Tanya, so originally it said Umas Ha'olam, the nations of the world. So in this Tanya over here, it's all fixed already. But this page is filled of corrections. For example, these words Elo Shebechutz La'aretz, if you look in the Tanya, which is not this print. Any one of any non-new print Tanyas over here?
Oh, yeah.
Where? Look right over there. Pull one out.
He knows it by heart anyway.
No, here's the old Hebrew English. That.
No, this is the new one already.
Here.
You have one there?
Here's one.
Oh, here you go. Okay.
You know it by heart anyway. You don't have to look.
Sorry?
You know it by heart anyway. You don't have to look.
So nice of you.
Here's another.
One is fine. Okay. One is just fine. So here, the words are Elo Sheba Artses Ha'evdi Galulim. In the land, that's what it says over there. But the original, when the Alter Rebbe wrote the letter, he wrote Shebechutz La'aretz. But when they printed it, the Alter Rebbe wrote the letter and sent it off to the people in Vilna. He wrote Shebechutz La'aretz. But when they printed it, it had to go through the censor, so they changed it.
That's better.
What?
This is better?
No, this is better. The one we have is better. Yeah, this is the yeah. So Elo Shebechutz La'aretz and Chutz La'aretz Achayis Hu Hayidei. We're saying that what? We're saying that the energy of Hashem, Malchus of Atzilus, is what creates this world. However, in Chutz La'aretz, Achayis Hu Hayidei Slapshus Sorem Achitzoyne Hamamunim Al Ayin Umas. The energy first enters and goes through. We know that every single nation has an archangel, right? A sar, a minister. There are 70 of them, and today in the UN, I think, there's 180 countries or something. But according to Torah, there's 70 nations, right? There's 70 in Parshas Noach. We have the 70 descendants of.
70 core nations.
Sorry?
70 core nations.
70 core nations, right. Which doesn't necessarily the Luxembourg or the Vatican, which are 1 square mile each or something, right? They don't necessarily constitute one of the original nations. So every one of the original nations has a sar,
Sir.
right? What does that mean? That a spark from the Dvar Hashem, Anikra b'Shem Malchus Dasiya, which, as we mentioned already, right? The Dvar Hashem, the word, the Hashem's Dibur, which creates our world as Malchus Dasiya. Umeir al asarim shalamayla b'bechinas makif malamayla. It illuminates on the sarim, on these 70 angels, b'bechinas makif malamayla, in a transcendent way above them. Ach eini mislabesh behem mamish, but doesn't really enter them. Elo nimshach lam chayis ma'aras, where they receive energy from the sa'aras, shemeir alei malamayla b'bechinas makif, that illuminates from above in a way of makif, in a way of transcendence. Why is that an important detail over here? This whole idea that it's in a way of makif. Here's the problem. Whenever you're dealing with klippa, because suddenly you realize we just entered the terrain, the world of klippa, the sphere of klippa. The ayin sarim, these are klippa. The malchus of asiya is the dvar Hashem, is kedusha. If kedusha is to enter, if elokus, godliness, enters into anything in a pneumistic way, then that thing itself automatically becomes kedusha. It becomes bottle. If the ayin sarim were able to comprehend and grasp their makar, their source in kedusha, they would be bottled entirely. So how do we have klipa? Klipa always exists only through Oyer Makif, never through Oyer Pnimi. Oyer Pnimi means a light which enters you, and you process it, and you get it, and you relate to it. But if the Oyer of Kedusha enters you in a Pnimiistic way, and you understand it, and you appreciate it, then you're Kedusha, then you're bottled to it. But what if it doesn't enter you? But it's Makif, it surrounds you, it transcends you. So obviously we're not talking physically surrounding, because we're talking about spiritual concepts. But that means that the light is removed from them to the point that they don't get it. So they're impacted by it, but it remains beyond them. And because it remains beyond them, that's why they are klipa. That's why they're klipa. Umahasarim. And from these 70 angels, Nishpa Chayis Lu'umais, that's where all of the nations get their energy from. And once again over here it says Nishpa Chayis Lo Evdi Gilulim. That's what it says over here. That's where in the old print, right here, Lo Umes, Ula Behemes Chayis Va'ifes Shabar Sisayim, and to the animals and the birds that are in their lands, Ula Eretz Hagashmis, and also the physical earth, Ula Shamayim Hagashmim, the physical heaven, Sheim Hagalgalim. We're talking here about the planets. Elam, the only difference is Shemayim va'aretz ubehemis v'chayis v'efes tahirim, the heavens and the earth, and kosher animals, nishpoyim klipas noiga. They come from klipas noiga. Va'atemeim v'nafshis ha'umes, and trefa animals, and goyim meshar klipas, they come from the other klipas. In other words, gimel klipas atmeis. So, recap what we learned today so far. Everything comes from, we're talking about the Asarim Amaras, right? Hashem's Dibur. Hashem's Dibur, again, is the same as Malchus. Where does Malchus, but there are many different levels of Malchus, right? As mentioned, the Malchus of Atzilus is what creates and gives life to the natives of Atzilus. Malchus the Bria gives life to the natives of Bria, and Malchus of Asiya is what gives energy to this world. However, if we're in Chutz La'aretz, that energy does not come to us directly from Kedusha, but rather that energy first passes through the Ayin Sarim. So ultimately, the energy that we're getting is Klipa energy. That's why everything in this world is sustained by Klipa. The heavens and the earth and everything that's within them in Chutz La'aretz. Kulam Kalei Mamash Chashivi, they are all considered nothing. They are completely nothing and bottle. Legabe Hasarim, relative to their
Minister.
the ministers, these angels, Shehem Chayusam V'Kiyumam, from where they get their energy. V'Hasarim, and the actual Sarim, and the ministers, these angels, Kalei Mamash Chashivi, they are considered nothing. Legabe Achayis Nim Shechlahem. When we're talking about relative to the energy that is within them, from the nitzutz, the spark of the Dvar Hashem, which illuminates upon them from above them. Nevertheless, even though that the Sarim are absolutely nothing compared to their source, but they're not bottled to their source. The energy within them is in Golus within them. The holy energy that's within the Sarim and within the worlds is in Golus. Because ultimately, as mentioned, these Sarim, these angels, are Klippa. And what is the definition of Golus? The definition of Golus is when you are in a place which is not a foreign and hostile environment, where you're forced to do things that you don't want to do. The same thing is the Dvar Hashem, the energy of Hashem, which enters the Klipes, which enters these angels, is in Golus. Why? Because these angels are Klipa. They're, forget about Bittul B'Metzias, they're not even Bittul Ayash. They are the ganzen Yeshus. But at the end of the day, what's giving them life? What's the energy? The energy in the Klippa is Kedusha, Zalakus, is the Dvar Hashem. Because everything comes from Hashem. That's why these angels are known as Elikim Acherim. Why? Because they consider themselves to be divine creatures. They're not Batal Tashem. And that's why the nations, when they talk about these angels, they call them Elokad Alakaya. There is a God and there's the God of the gods. They look at their angels as gods. Shagam hein hein b'chilas alakus. They look at them as a Metzias, as a divine entity. The nations that receive their energy from these klipos are literally idol worshippers. Until the end of times, when death and the Sitra Achra will all be swept away. And then Hashem will cause the nations to transform, likri kulam b'shem Hashem, and all of them will call out the name of Hashem. V'nikra gamkein b'shem Golas HaShechina, and this is called Golas HaShechina. The fact that the divine light has to enter the klipos is called Golas HaShechina. Because at the end of the day, this energy, which is in Golos within the klipos, ultimately, where do these klipos, the energy, their life force is from? Their life force is from the energy of Hashem that comes directly from the Shechina. The Golus now. So now the Alter Rebbe, in this parentheses, the Alter Rebbe is going to bavar on a question. I say that. 1 second. So you're saying that this is called Golus Hashchina, but don't we know that general? It says when did Golus Hashchina begin? When did Hashem go into Golus? When we went into Golus, right? Because Golus Edem, right? Kol Makom Shegolu Yisrael Shechina Imam. Wherever the Yidden went into Golus, Shechina is with them. When we went to Edem, Shechina is with us. But what we're describing over here, the Teifa animals and the heavens and the earth and everything is Klippa, that's from well before the Golus. From the time of the creation of the world, there's already Teifa animals. Teifa animals, and even kosher animals, they all receive new. They all receive their energy from Klippa. Now, if Klippa receives its energy from the Dvar Hashem, that means that the Golus Hashchina started well before our Golus. So how are we? So how do we work that out? So I'll do first the answer outside, and then we'll do it inside. There's a certain element of Golus Hashchina that started with the Chet Eitzadas. Starting from the Chet Eitzadas already, at that point in time, the Shekhinah already entered Klippa in order to create the objects of this world. But what part of the Shekhinah entered? This is what we call the Chitzonius or Achuraim of the Shekhinah, a lower level of the Shekhinah. Why? Because all of creation ultimately receives its energy from the Achuraim, or the lower part of the Shekhinah. The Yidden, on the other hand, we know that Yisrael alu b'machshava. This is something that we've talked about at length when we learned Iggeres HaTshuva. Yisrael alu b'machshava. Whereas all the nations, all the world comes from a lower level of Hashem. We call the Chitzonius or the Achuraim, the part of Hashem which is not really fully invested, you might want to say. The Yidden come from the highest level of Hashem. Alu b'machshava. We come from the highest level of Hashem's machshava. Vayipach ba'apav nishmas chaim. The neshama of a Yid comes from a much deeper place than any other part of creation. When we went into Golus, so that added into the Golus HaShechina, that now not only is it Achuraim and the Chitzonius of the Shechina that's in Golus, but the Pnimius Achayis of the Shechina is also in Golus. Inside. The Golus and Nimshach, Mechet Eitz Hadas Ve'elach. This Golus began. In other words, the general Golus HaShechina began from the time of the Chet Eitz Hadas. But at that time, the only thing that went into Golus was the Achuraim of Kedusha. However, when the Yidden went into Golus amongst the nations, and where do the Yidden come from? And what is the Shadish of Klal Yisrael? Yidden come from the Pnimius of Hashem. Hine zuhi golus shlema. This is a complete golus. Now we have the entirety of the Shekhinah and golus. And regarding this, our sages tell us golus le'edim Shekhinah imam. But we went into golus to edim the Shekhinah is with us. So what do we have so far? We have a very deeper understanding. We said before, everything is from Hashem. Because ultimately everything is created by Hashem and everything receives its energy from Hashem. But now we understand that most of the things in this world, they're taka created by Hashem, which is the Dvar Hashem Dasar Mamaris, but they're created through Klippa. Not directly from Hashem, through Klippa. But ultimately, as we'll see and as we'll learn next week, even in the Klippa, the Dvar Hashem that's there still is the Shekhinah. It operates through the Klippa, but it still is the Shekhinah, which is why we're saying it's the Golos HaShekhinah. The concept of Golos HaShekhinah is that Hashem is in and operating in and through the Klippa. We'll continue Mitzvah Shem on this more next week. Just a small little connection to Chanukah. Right now, that we know the Medrash tells us something interesting, that one of the things that the Greeks did is that they told the Yidden, Kisvu lachem al karen asher she'ein lachem chilek v'lekei Yisrael. They asked them to write on the horn of an ox that they have no portion in the God of Israel. The Medrash was tzarech bir. What does that mean? Ox, the horn of an ox. What's that all about? So we know the Yidden, their chayis comes from the Pnimius of Hashem, as we mentioned just now. The Goyim, they don't have an Nefesh Shalikis, right? They have an Nefesh Bahamis only. Where does the Nefesh Bahamis come from? What is the source of the Nefesh Bahamis? The source of anything which is animalistic comes from the Pnei Shoyer in the Merkava. Ultimately, the Shoyerish in Kedusha, the source in Kedusha, and that's where all animals come from. That's where the Nefesh Bahamis comes from. The Nefesh Bahamis of a Yid, the Nefesh Bahamis of a Goy. However, the Pnei Shoyer, the Shoyer as it is in Kedusha, is in the world of Bria. It's a very, very high level. But then you have the Keren Hasher, not the Shoyer itself. The Keren, what is the Keren? The Keren is the Psoilus. In terms of halacha, the Karnaim and the Tlafayim, these parts of the body, the horns and the hooves, they're not considered even part of the Iker of the body, regarding many different areas, Tumah, Tara, and others. Kashrus, like is the horn of a treifa animal is a treif, it's not considered part of the... So it's considered the psoilus, the waste. It's considered an outgrowth of, but an unimportant outgrowth. It's not considered part of the etzema. The same thing is also from Kedusha, from the Pnei Shoyer, We have the outgrowth, the klipa that comes, that emanates, and that's where the goyim come from. The goyim come from the Karen Asher. And the Yidden come from the Pneumius. And this is what bothered the Greeks. Bothered the Greeks is that they come from the Karen Asher,
How did they know that?
and the Yidden, their neshamas felt it. Masalayu Chazi. A lot of things, when we're talking about all these stories, a lot of people act because they're subconscious. In other words, a whole thing in Chanukah, and Chassidus talks about the goyim. Well, what are they doing? They came into the base of Mikdash. What were they doing? What are they busy with? The oil. Let's just oil, about the oil. So Chassidus talks about it extensively, what oil represents, and why the Greeks the main thing because oil represents Chokhmah. And they needed to defile the Chokhmah, because that was their union. But they're operating in ways which they themselves didn't understand why they're operating in this way. So they want the Yidden, no, I'm Karen Asher, you're just like us. I want you to write on a Karen Asher that we have no portion in the Lekei Yisrael. We don't have no shaykhis, the Pnimius. You're just like everyone else. And the Yidden were Moshe Nefesh, Beferish not. We're not, because they're Moshe Nefesh not to do that, which is really the similar idea we're talking about, how the Oyer is Nishtalshul. Ultimately, everything receives its chayis from Hashem. Even the Goyim, it's Karen Hasher, and the Shayr is Kedusha. The Shayr is the Pnei Shayr, the Merkava. But by the time it comes down, there's a Golus Hashchina, and it is Taka, the Oyer of Hashem, the Dvar Hashem, the Malchus is in Shchina, is in Golus, and we'll continue on this Mir Hashem next week.
But nevertheless.